England won the World Cup in 1966. Since then, generations of players and millions of fans have waited for football to come home again. But decade after decade, England keeps falling short. Good morning, guys, and welcome to Flop Files. Today, we're diving deep into the profound heartbreak, the hope, and the completely turbulent history of a nation that expects to conquer the world, yet almost always leaves empty-handed. We're going to explore the psychological weight of a jersey that literally seems to suffocate the greatest talents of our generation. To really wrap our heads around this curse, we actually have to start with the victory. In 1966, England didn't just win the World Cup. They validated a really dangerous belief. Because they invented the game, they felt they inherently owned it. That single victory bred this stubborn, almost institutional arrogance. The famous journalist Hunter Davies noted how the English establishment literally scoffed at new continental tactics and emerging sports science. They thought it was a joke. While European teams were adapting, wearing these lightweight, agile 1.5-pound boots, English players were lumbering around in heavy 3.5-pound ones. They jokingly called the lighter boots continental slippers. They completely ignored modern diets, steadfastly believing that steak, heavy chips, and 10 pints of beer after a match was the genuine breakfast of champions. That arrogant dismissal of global football innovation, that basically set the stage for decades of failure. So while the English football establishment was comfortably resting on those 1966 laurels, the rest of the world evolved. They caught up, and then they completely surpassed England tactically. And what followed was an era of absolute, agonizing heartbreak. England suddenly found themselves running headfirst into a wall of brutal early exits. It really all kicked off with Diego Maradona's incredibly controversial Hand of God in 1986, where divine intervention, or let's be real, a very sneaky fist, knocked them out. Then came 1990 in Turin. Then Euro 96 on home soil. Then that grueling 1998 clash with Argentina in Saint-Étienne. If you look at this string of defeats, aside from Maradona's punch, a distinct, terrifying pattern emerges. These exits introduced a trauma that would haunt English football for an entire generation, the dreaded penalty shootout. But before we get into the cold, hard math of those penalties, we really have to talk about the raw emotion. Picture Italy 90. It's the World Cup semifinal against the mighty West Germany. Paul Gascoigne, the beating, entirely unpredictable heart of the England team, makes a lunging tackle in the 99th minute. The referee reaches into his pocket and pulls out a yellow card. In that exact fraction of a second, Gascoigne realizes the devastating truth. He'll be suspended for the final if England wins. His bottom lip famously starts trembling. He completely breaks down in tears right there on the pitch, in front of millions of viewers. His manager, Bobby Robson, later said Gaz's heart just hit his shoes. And in that emotionally shattered, utterly devastated state, Gascoigne actually withdrew from taking a kick in the ensuing penalty shootout. England lost. The modern trauma was officially born, and the curse was cemented in the national psyche. Which brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? Have you ever wondered why a team of world-class elite athletes suddenly forgets how to kick a football from exactly 12 yards away? Why does England always fail from the penalty spot? It's not just a run of bad luck. It's actually a deeply ingrained psychological and statistical phenomenon. The stark mathematical reality of this curse is genuinely staggering. Get this, out of 7 major tournament shootouts leading up to the modern era, England won exactly one. Just one. They hold a terrible, crippling 30% miss rate. Compare that to their great historical rivals, Germany, who have won 5 out of 7 major shootouts with an incredibly elite miss rate of just 15%. When an English player walks up to that spot, the numbers literally dictate failure. This isn't a coin toss anymore. It's a systematic, institutional collapse under pressure. So what's actually causing this massive gap? Well, data from sports psychologists reveals a few fascinating, deeply human things. First, the immense pressure of high public status in England severely inhibits the players. The tabloid culture there creates this paralyzing fear of failure. Second, and honestly most tellingly, they rush. English players start their run-up a mere 0.2 seconds after the referee blows the whistle. Why? Because psychologically, they just want to get the agonizing, suffocating pressure over with as quickly as possible. And third, they completely lack the technical confidence to shoot high into the top corners of the net, where goalkeepers practically have a 0% chance of saving the ball. Instead, gripped by fear, they hit it hard and low, which is exactly the height where professional keepers make almost all of their saves. Now, you probably think all this psychological baggage would disappear when England produced the greatest collection of individual talent since 1966. Enter the 2006 Golden Generation. I mean, we're talking about absolute global superstars here. David Beckham, Wayne Rooney, Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, Paul Scholes, Rio Ferdinand. These weren't just good players, these guys were icons. 5 of these men would finish in the World Player of the Year top 10 during their careers. They were winning the Champions League, dominating global football, and earning astronomical wages. Yet wearing the England shirt, this exact group produced 0 wins against elite opposition in knockout football. 0. As Steven Gerrard bluntly and painfully put it years later, we were egotistical losers. But talent isn't everything, right? Especially when the environment is completely broken. Behind closed doors, that 2006 dressing room was incredibly toxic. Manchester United players literally wouldn't even speak to Chelsea or Liverpool players while eating dinner. The fierce, bitter Premier League rivalries had completely poisoned the national camp. Add to that the tactical chaos of manager Sven-Göran Eriksson, who infamously shoved the brilliant Paul Scholes out to the left wing just to force Gerrard and Lampard into the middle together. Oh, and the media circus? The wives and girlfriends, the famous wags, turned the team's base in Baden-Baden into a daily tabloid spectacle. There were paparazzi swarms, massive bar bills, constant front-page drama. It was a literal circus. They lost their focus for the tournament before they even stepped onto the pitch. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to Flop Files and share this video with a football fan. Okay, so let's look at how all this internal toxicity totally exploded on July 1st, 2006 in the World Cup quarterfinal against Portugal. It basically played out as a brutal tragedy in 3 acts. Step 1. Captain David Beckham, the literal symbol of this generation, suffers a harsh ankle injury and limped off the pitch in tears, fully knowing his World Cup is over. Step 2. The incredibly gifted 20-year-old phenom Wayne Rooney snaps. Rooney was playing under the crushing weight of an entire nation, combined with the terrifying stress of a pre-match death threat to his family. Under that suffocating pressure, he stamps on Portugal's Ricardo Carvalho and gets a straight red card. Step 3. England, suddenly down to 10 men, defends desperately, running themselves into the ground to somehow secure a 0-0 deadlock after 120 minutes of exhausting football. Which brought them right back to their ultimate, recurring nightmare: penalties. Could the Golden Generation, armed with all their Champions League medals, their massive egos, and world-class technique, finally break the shootout curse against Portuguese goalkeeper Ricardo? It was the ultimate moment of truth. The answer was a devastating no. Frank Lampard, one of the most reliable penalty takers on earth, missed. Steven Gerrard, Liverpool's hero, missed. Jamie Carragher, who was brought onto the pitch specifically just to take a penalty, hit the crossbar. 3 of the most reliable players in the country completely failed. England was going home. But years later, a fascinating hidden letter from manager Sven-Göran Eriksson surfaced. In it, he admitted he knew they'd lose the exact moment Rooney was sent off. Not because they were missing a player, but because the remaining guys had completely stopped listening to him. The tactical formation was broken, the trust was gone, and the dream was actually dead long before the penalty kicks even started. That devastating 2006 exit really ushered in the dark ages of the modern era. The years that followed were an exhausting, punishing test of loyalty for English fans. In 2010, an aging, sluggish squad was absolutely humiliated 4-1 by Germany, famously hindered by Frank Lampard's ghost goal that somehow wasn't counted by the referee. Then, in 2016, they suffered arguably their most shameful defeat in history, a spineless, utterly directionless surrender to Iceland. Goalkeeper Joe Hart fumbled the ball, and the players just looked completely lost out there. 2018 brought a brief, wonderful glimmer of hope under new manager Gareth Southgate, but even that ended in familiar, draining extra-time heartbreak against Croatia. The trauma just kept piling up. But then came the true test of the Southgate era. Southgate actually achieved the seemingly impossible. He cured the toxic club rivalries and made the players actually love wearing the national shirt again. They fought their way to the Euro 2020 final at Wembley Stadium. In front of a roaring home crowd, they scored in the 2nd minute. But then, those old fears crept in. They retreated. Italy equalized, and once again, the shootout curse struck. Rashford, Sancho, and Saka all missed. Then, at the 2022 World Cup, facing the defending champions France, England played brilliantly. But their captain, the usually automatic Harry Kane, stepped up and skied a crucial penalty kick way over the bar. It was the exact same old story. So close, yet so agonizingly far. Which leaves an entire nation staring at the exact same question they've been asking since that fateful day back in 1966. Will football ever actually come home? Can decades of deep historical trauma and psychological blockades really be overcome by a team kicking a ball? While there is a bright beacon of hope on the horizon for 2026, a completely new generation is taking the reins, led by incredible talents like Jude Bellingham, Bukayo Saka, and Phil Foden. But what makes them truly different from the golden generation? They actively studied the failures of the past. They literally grew up watching documentaries about these exact collapses. They saw exactly how massive egos, bitter club rivalries, and media circuses destroyed their predecessors. This new squad prioritizes brotherhood and true squad unity over individual stardom. They leave their club badges at the door. They've completely changed the entire culture of the team. England may have invented the game, but football's greatest prize has remained out of reach for generations. The question remains, is it bad luck, pressure, or a curse that refuses to end? Thanks for watching Flop Files.